I don't call the bureaucracy the fourth branch of government because I call the media that. The bureaucracy, I guess, could be a fifth branch, but really, they're just an extension of the executive and legislative branches in a sense. The legislative branch makes laws. The executive branch sees to it that the laws are implemented in the way that they see that the laws are implemented is through the bureaucracy. Now, this slide here is just for your information. It gives you it adds a little bit. It's not in the chapter, but a German sociologist / historian named Max Weber or Weber came up with 5 characteristics of a bureaucracy. There is a hierarchy, that is, those that are on top, the leaders. And in the case of our government, the executive branch, specifically the president, would be the hierarchy. Not just him, but we would also include his 15 department secretaries, as well as some other key leaders of agencies. And then all of those departments and all of those agencies, they get people who are professionals, people who are experts in their fields to work on taking a law and then applying it, implementing it in society. There is formality in bureaucracies. That is, there's formal ways that they do what they do. They have rules, regulations, procedures. There's record keeping, and then there is specialization. That's just a little bit extra, you know, it might be a nice little bonus question on the test. But anyway, you will have it in your slides. So there's 4 tasks or 4 functions of the federal bureaucracy. These are listed on pages 511 through 514. And they may be worded just a little bit differently, but they're the same thing. And I do have the textbook brought up. They're penetrating the bureaucracy. Okay. What do they do, the bureaucrats? So they implement laws, which would be basically enforcing laws. It's listed number 1 in the chapter. It's number 3 here on the slide. Rule at education. Make sure the rules are enforced and examine to see if rules have been followed or broken. Then bureaucrats also make rules So they have a new law that comes down from the president and the Senate. And they want to implement that law. And so they make rules so that the law is implemented into society, also called the regulatory process. They also administer the rules, kind of the heart of what they do. In the textbook, it's number 3. Sorry, it was number 1. Implement laws. Implement is administer. Enforce is a little different. Sorry about that. Implement the laws. And then they are also the 4th function. They are to be innovative, and that's where the specialization and the experts come in to innovate. And there's a good case study in your textbook about the government's creation of the internet. The government's creation of the internet. It was largely, you can see here, well, I might not have the textbook on there. Hold on a second. You can see here that it was largely developed by the U.S. Department of Defense. It began in 1957 after the Soviet Union, Russia, launched Sputnik, the first satellite to orbit Earth. Congress authorized the establishment of the Advanced Research Project Agency to develop, among other things, a means of maintaining communications in the event of a strategic attack on the existing telecommunications network. So the Russians put this satellite in space, and it spooked our Congress. What if they get technology to where they can destroy our communications? And so they created this agency to come up with a way to maintain communications in case of an attack. This agency came up with a design called ARPANET. Took about a decade to create. And then a few years later, by 1971, there were 20 universities connected to the ARPANET. That is the forerunner to the internet. But what we see there is we see the innovation of the bureaucracy. So those are the 4 functions. You want to read up on those pages. Any question before we move to the types of agencies within the bureaucracy? Are you guys still seeing the textbook or the slides?
Textbook.
Textbook, okay. Now it should be slides. All righty. So the federal bureaucracy is made up of agencies that are federal agencies, federal government, or there are independent agencies that are not tied into the government, but they do work with the federal government. So these four different types of federal agencies are found on pages 517 to 21. The first three here are going to be federal agencies that are tied in with the government. But for the most part, the majority of the people working for these agencies are civilians. I believe there's over 1 million civilian employees with these federal agencies. Now, you will have seen a couple of these categories before concerning the institutional presidency. So there are 15 executive departments: Department of Defense, Department of Education. There's 15 of those. When George Washington became our first president, he had 4 executive departments. Today, there's 15. The head of each of those departments, you'll remember, is what makes up the cabinet of the president, those 15 department heads. And this group is confirmed. The president appoints who he wants to be the head of each department, but Congress has to approve them, similar to the appointment and approval of a Supreme Court justice. Now, these 15 departments employ over 80% of the federal civilian workforce. So I believe it was 1.3 million federal civilian workers in the bureaucracy. So you're looking at 8.5 million are going to be involved with these 15 departments. Many of them with the Department of Defense, military, many of them with the Department of Veteran Affairs, and many of them with Homeland Security. I am bringing up for you to view this picture from page 517 of President Trump meeting with his cabinet. They will have a regular meeting. Here's the department heads, and they will discuss the affairs of each department or agency. So there'll be more than 15 people around the big table, and then those on the outer ring would be staff members. Now, after the executive departments, we have 3 other agencies. We have independent regulatory commissions. And you can tell by the name that their main purpose is to regulate. And it will be specific areas that they will be focused on regulating. For example, the Federal Trade Commission is focused on trade. Then you have government corporations. These are like businesses, but they're government businesses that serve the public for a fee. So one of the probably the biggest one is the United States Postal Service. The U.S. Postal Service is a government corporation. You go in there to mail a letter or a package, and you have to pay a fee or pay postage to get that mailed. So it's a government business or corporation serving the public for a fee. Technically, they're supposed to be able to support themselves. That is, they're not going to receive government funding. So the United States Postal Service is technically would raise enough money through its services to pay for the postmasters and the mail carriers, things like that. Another government corporation is Amtrak, the train service. So government corporations. And then you have the fourth group is the group that's not tied into the government, so to speak. They're not a part of the executive department like these other three are, but they do work with the federal government, independent agencies. An example here is NASA. But the president does serve who will be the head of these agencies. The Environmental Protection Agency is another one. So those are the four types of agencies that organize the federal bureaucracy. Here's a little figure to show the executive branch, and you see the textbook is including the bureaucracy as a part of the executive branch. So that's why we don't call the bureaucracy the fourth branch of government. So the executive would be the presidency, the vice presidency, the cabinet, the White House staff, and the executive office of the president. And then these 15 departments executive departments would fall under the executive department, and each of the leaders is a part of the cabinet. Then you have independent commissions, government corporations below them, and then below them you have the independent agencies. Oh, excuse me. Any questions? Moving on. Here's the 15 executive departments. So you have the Department of State, the Department of Defense, Department of Treasury, Department of Energy. All of those are the 15 departments of state, or the executive departments, excuse me. Regulatory commissions are designed to protect the public interest. They control certain types of businesses in industries like banking and finance. The stock exchange, communications. That is to protect, those commissions are to protect the public interest. Then here's some examples of some independent agencies. You all, I know, have heard of NASA, the space agency, but you've probably heard of FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. This is the group that goes into places like in 2005, there was a huge hurricane that hit New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina. And FEMA, that was an example of FEMA kind of dropping the ball. FEMA usually goes in and coordinates activities for people to come in and clean up the neighborhoods, to provide temporary housing for people who lost their house, set up provision of food. So FEMA also meets with individuals who maybe had a tree, from the hurricane, a tree fell on their house. So a FEMA official would meet with that couple and help get them funds to replace their roof or whatever damage was done to the home. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, they are those who come up with regulations and rules for how to treat the environment, how to take care of the environment. They would come up with regulations for like Ford and Chevy and Dodge. They would come up with regulations for how much carbon can be emitted from their engines. So that would force those companies to come up with technology to cut down on carbon emissions, which is a result of fossil fuels, which destroy the ozone layer. So that's the Environmental Protection Agency. Having rules for factories about not dumping their waste in rivers and polluting the rivers. So we kind of like those agencies. We need those things because it protects the public. Independent regulatory commissions. We already talked about them. They deal with areas like finance and banking. Also Nuclear Regulatory Commission, Consumer Product Safety. And then the government corporations like the post office. Did you guys just see those notices flash up on the screen? I'm just curious if you see notices when they flash up on my screen. Yay, nay? No, okay. Do you see the slides right now? Okay. All right, we'll cover this one last thing and we'll call it a day. Since three of your classmates were not here, give you guys some extra time. This will be relevant to the study of the changing of presidential power. The federal bureaucracy's personnel system. In other words, the people who work for the bureaucracy. It began with our founding generation and their outlook that government should be by gentlemen, that is by the upper class citizens who have land and property and money, and who would do what is right and would properly represent all people. So that's how the bureaucracy began. Washington would have chosen his 4 cabinet members to be those secretaries of those departments because they were men from the elite ruling class. They were educated. They would seek to do what would be in the interests of the people. With Andrew Jackson came the spoil system. So Andrew Jackson comes into the White House. He doesn't keep the same people to be Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense, but he replaces them with his own people who are loyal to him, family members, people in his political party. That's the spoil system, the spoils of war. Sometimes also called patronage. This is where you reward supporters with government jobs. One day, King Bings becomes governor of Oklahoma, and he allows Kennedy to be my state superintendent of schools, right? Because she was such a great student in class, and she takes education very seriously. And she does, as all of you do, since there's all of just A's and B's in the class. So, and then maybe get Nicole to be my, I don't know, maybe my secretary of the Department of Transportation. But I'm getting those that I'm assuming you would have supported me in my run for governor. That changed in 1883 with the Pendleton Act. With the Pendleton Act came a new system, which is in your textbook, called the merit system. And this said, bureaucracy positions need to be filled by people who are competent to do the job. So, someone becomes president, and they want to appoint a secretary of finance. They need to appoint somebody who has expertise or experience in the field of finances and money. Secretary of Defense probably will get somebody who has served in the military. They understand a lot of the intricacies of our relationships with other people when it comes to military relationships. So that was put into place in 1883. And I think it's a good thing. We do want people in these positions who are competent, who have expertise in those areas. And so they came up with tests and other ways to evaluate people to see if they would be qualified for those positions. What you know is more important than who you know. Okay, any questions? Well, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you on Friday morning. Have a great half Wednesday and Thursday.